Well, folks, this is going to be a fantastic Leading Your Best Life podcast. We're talking to a guy, an Australian in Scotland. Greg Hincks, welcome to Leading Your Best Life.
Good morning, good afternoon to you. How are you?
What time is it over there?
It's 6:30 in the morning and we've still got about an hour and a half until sunrise.
Oh, is this a swimming morning for you?
Not today. There's gale force winds blowing today, so I'll give it a miss today.
And you're located in where?
I'm just north of Glasgow in the Trossachs, not far from where Braveheart was filmed.
Oh, magnificent. In the tropics of Scotland. Beautiful, mate,
Yeah.
beautiful. So we met via Pod Squad, our swimming group here in Perth. You'd come out here, and as you say, that was your first trip to Perth, but you'd met my good mate Shane McGurk on a swimming tour that you were hosting. So let's before we get to all of that, let's hear the Greg Hincks story. Like, where have you come from? Where did you go to school? How did you end up in north of Glasgow? Tell me the story.
Well, how long have we got?
Well, we got as much time as you want, mate.
Okay, well, I grew up in Newcastle in New South Wales.
Mm-hmm.
Went to school there, went to high school there, had a great life as a kid living on a beach, did lots of swimming, playing cricket, playing soccer, that sort of lifestyle, mucking around, having a great time. Then I met a lady, we got married. By the time I was 30, I had 3 kids. I was also employed working for the ATO as a feared tax man. They put me through university. So I was studying after work, part-time, worked my way up through the ranks in the ATO. Unfortunately, I came down with depression in the early 2000s. My marriage fell apart. I got a divorce, moved out of home, but still in Newcastle at that stage, which I found really difficult leaving the family life. I was very much a devoted family man, was running around after my 3 kids, getting them interested in stuff, getting them interested in swimming. I remember my son saying to me, "Dad, when can I give up this squad training that you're making us go to?" I said, "I'm not making you go to it, but you can give it up when you beat me in various races." So he started beating me in the races, and I said, "Yeah, but I can still beat you in 50 metre free." So it took him a while to catch me in the 50 metre free, but he finally did and gave it up. So then I met another lady, got married to her, and then I started exploring the world, which was something I always wanted to do. In 2009, I walked the Camino in France and Spain, which was an amazing experience for 5 weeks. Never knew anything about Spain and was just blown away by the culture of this place. Then I moved to Sydney for work. And then in about 2013, they were offering redundancy programs. And I put my hand up for early redundancy on the basis that I'd been in the ATO for 30 years by that stage. I was getting a bit stale and needed a change. Wasn't expecting to get offered a redundancy because I thought I was too young. But they did offer it to me, which I accepted. And then I decided to move to the UK on the basis that I was working at that stage for a company called SwimTrek, which is probably the biggest swimming adventure company in the world. And they were based in the UK, and I had a summer job working for them in Croatia. But as you can imagine, the commute from Australia to Croatia was not easy. So it was easier to commute from the UK to Croatia. So I moved to Scotland in 2014. And I think that some of my Scottish heritage came out because I moved to Scotland because I thought it was cheap. And it was a lot cheaper than, say, London or Manchester or Birmingham or those sort of places. Plus, Scotland had all this water that you could swim in. I'd had heard stories of. And in Scotland, you had the right to enter the waters a lot easier than what you could in England, where it was a lot more restricted. Of course, being from the east coast of New South Wales, the idea of cold water was about 15 degrees in the middle of a freezing cold winter patch, and you'd wear the wetsuit and think that you're a hero wearing the wetsuit for those 2 weeks of winter when it's cold enough for a wetsuit. And once I got to Scotland, I realised that 15 degrees was probably average temperature in the summertime in the freshwater lochs and in the sea, if you're lucky. So I started swimming in Scotland, caught up with some people on Facebook groups and made good friends, started doing longer swims, like 15, 16 kilometre swims down lochs, that sort of thing, wearing wetsuits. Wow. And some of my friends were crazy enough to go without wetsuits in the summer, and even a smaller number of them were brave enough to try it in the winter. And I thought I wanted another challenge, so I thought I'll try this non-wetsuit stuff, which is called skins here in the UK. Mm-hmm. So I started going skins in the summer, and then transitioning through to the winter, which took me about 2 winters to get to the stage where I was tolerating the cold. I wouldn't say I ever found it comfortable, but I tolerated it. And then I saw that one of my swimming buddies was competing in these ice swimming championships around the place, and she always came back with this buzz of stories about how great the comradeship was, and it was supportive and all this sort of stuff. For those of you in Australia, an ice swimming championship is when the water has to be under 5 degrees Celsius for it to be recognised as a ice swim.
Wow.
So I started competing, and all you're wearing is what you'd wear to pod squad.
Just your bathers.
Bathers, goggles and cap. That's it. Man. That's all you're allowed to wear.
Skins indeed.
So I started competing in that. And then I realised that there was an Australian record for the 1 kilometre ice swim held by a guy I knew quite well who lives in London. And he was just slightly older than me, and I thought I might be able to beat that record. So I went to Northern Ireland and competed in the Irish Championships in 2019, and I missed his record by 2.5 seconds over a kilometre. So I was the third Australian to do a ice kilometre, which I was pretty proud of, and ranked number 2. And to this day, as of 2024, still ranked number 2, mainly because not many Australians have done an ice kilometre. No. My next goal was to do an ice mile, but I haven't quite managed to do that yet. I've had a few setbacks the last few winters, and haven't got that. Now, a lot of Australians have done an ice mile. About 30 Australians have done an ice mile, which is doing 1,600 metres.
1,600,
in under 5 degrees Celsius, under the same rules, bathers, goggles and cap. So about 30 of them. I'm now ranked 3rd for Australia overall because a lass from Armidale competed at the world titles in the French Alps last winter, which was 2023, about January 2023. And she beat our record by 3 minutes. But then she was about 30 years younger than us.
Yeah.
So me and Nick are always joke that one of the aims of the organisation doing this ice swims and ice swimming championships is to make it a winter swimming event at the Winter Olympics.
All right.
So we're joking around saying, well, at this stage, we're a shoo-in for the Australian relay team because we're ranked number 1 and 2. And we'll be 30 years older than all the other competitors walking around the opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics. But then we also recognise that if it does become a winter sport, all the hot swimmers in Australia will start trying to get times up, and our achievements will be thrown into the mists of the murky, dark time, and we won't be eligible. But it's nice to joke about that.
Yeah, and you're dreaming, you're planning, you're inventing the future, you're brainstorming, and living in hope as well. Exactly. Where there's life, there's hope. Where there's hope, there's life too.
Exactly. So I haven't competed in events for a few years, mainly because I haven't done enough training, and I'm of the view that I'm not going to compete until I'm confident that I can do a pretty good job, because it's not easy training to do that sort of stuff. Not only do you have to go into the pool to get your times up and your fitness up, you also have to go outside in the cold water and get your cold water tolerance up and adjust to what the cold water is doing too, because you're about 20% slower in the cold water.
Yeah,
and you have to learn, because you're going into mild hypothermia, you have to learn to recognize your own body, where your limits are, what you can achieve, when to push yourself, when not to push, how to do it all safely, all that sort of stuff, which is something that everyone has to learn.
Yeah, wow.
And you got the joys of, after you're having for a swim, you can't feel your fingers and toes, and trying to put clothes on and trying to put socks on toes that don't want to work with you, and walking on them is painful, and sitting in a car with the heated seats going and the heated steering wheel on and the hot air conditioning blowing full bore as you're drinking hot drinks to try and warm up before you feel capable of even driving the car.
Goodness gracious. So there's a social event at the end of it, I gather. What are people all sitting in cars drinking coffee, trying to heat themselves up? Once
we've warmed up, because we're parked up next to a lock or something, we will then go to a coffee shop with a nice fire to have some coffee and cake and chat and talk about the social aspects. A bit like what you guys do at Pod Squad, except we're not sitting on milk crates out the front of the coffee shop. We're sitting on top of the fire to keep warm in 6 or 7 layers of clothing.
Goodness gracious, what a world. And how many people are doing this with you on a daily or weekly basis, and how often do you do it?
On a weekly basis, there's a group of about 6 or 8 of us doing it in one group, and I'm a member of another group where it's about up to a dozen people we get, but of that group, it's about 50% wetsuit, 50% non-wetsuit, because that other second group is mainly guys doing training for Ironmans, that sort of stuff. So where they're allowed to wear wetsuits, so they keep the wetsuits on. And in addition to that, I also do take people on retreat weekends, which you've seen some photos of. I do that about 5 or 6 times a year, but that's in Wales, where my current partner lives and came from. So it's
is that on your website? Is that on your website? Should I go to is that on the website?
There's not much on my website. On my Instagram account, there's links to that. My Facebook account, there is links to that as well.
I'll go on.
So we do that, and in January we often have to, in the various ponds and lakes we swim in, take people to have to cut the ice. In fact, the ones we did a few weeks ago, the ice in the mountain lake, which was about 400 metres above sea level, was too thick for us to get in. So we had to we had to go elsewhere for a swim for that instance. And that's the first time that's ever happened. Other times we could just cut the ice, which can be 1 to 3 centimetres thick, jump in, have a dip of up to 10 minutes, and then just get out.
Okay, I'm going to go to Greg in the water. That's you, Greg in the water. Okay, I'm going to just share the screen, and we'll show some of the pictures of Greg in the water on Instagram. So here you are. So there it is. There's ice on the side there.
That's ice on the side.
Oh, goodness. And you guys swam in that? Or was
we
too hard
didn't
to
go in that. That was we had an axe to try get in, but we couldn't. We broke through about 10 centimetres of ice to the first layer of water, and then there was more ice under that. So we gave up. That's the local river. That's where we went for the backup swim. There was ice on the edge of that river the previous day.
Right. This is in Wales?
That's in Wales.
At River Flow Yoga, mid-Wales.
Yes.
Lots of ice.
Correct.
Oh, boy, folks, it's pretty amazing.
So that's the mountain lake again. And we had a sauna that's a sauna we had for the first swim on a Friday night after the people went in the river.
So they went in the river, then they had the sauna.
And then some of them went back in the river again and then back in the sauna.
Wow, that's great. Wow.
So that's the river, and you can just see the ice on the edge there. So that water was there. That was about 1.5 degrees, that water.
Heavens above. And people, well, look, what's happening here? People are just sitting in.
That's a pond we got in. Just in front of the guy in the yellow, you can see the ice.
Yes, big chunks of ice.
Sitting on ice. So we had to clear that ice to get people in.
My goodness.
That water was about 3 degrees.
So when you talk, so what happens on these retreats when you take people? Obviously, they go swimming. Do they do yoga, or they do personal development stuff, or they meditate, or what?
We do 4 yoga classes over the weekend. We take them for 4 dips as well. We also do a mountain walk up to a hill and look over the hills and chat about what their aims are and just get them to focus on that sort of thing. So
Yeah, beautiful.
It's a beautiful weekend. And we have this January, we've had people come back for the third time to do it.
They got so much out of it.
They get so much out of it.
Because they're stretching their comfort zones. There's no doubt they're stretching their comfort zones, aren't they?
Oh yeah, exactly. And we also do this weekends in more pleasant times of the year, in the spring, the summer, and the autumn. So
there's Cottesloe. That's you.
There's Cottesloe. That's when I came out to swim with you guys.
No ice there.
No. Now this one's in Hamilton Island.
Okay.
I was up there on it. That's swimming at Whitehaven Beach.
They said 27 degrees.
27 degrees, having to wear the stinger suit.
Yes, different things to deal with there.
Yeah, mate. That's Heron Island, where we went for a swimming holiday there as well in October last year.
Okay.
Run by a guy I knew from Sydney.
Yeah, brilliant. And there's the Kangaroos. Where's
That's the Kangaroos at Southwest Rocks on the mid-north coast of New South Wales.
I've got good mates that live up at Southwest Rocks. Roger Wilkinson. So,
it's beautiful.
And what happens here? This is a seafood dinner of some kind.
That's I was running a swim holiday in Croatia in September 2023, and that was just one of the restaurants we went to, just an average feed we'd have in a restaurant.
Fantastic. Hvar, fantastic place. Fantastic. Yeah. And as you say, the swimming in Croatia is fantastic too, isn't it? The waters just seem so clear. I remember swimming there same way.
And for aging males like us, it's very supportive because it's so salty.
Yes,
so it's like swimming with a pool boy the whole time.
Yeah, right. So what motivates Greg Hincks to do all this?
Well, that's a good question, because when you sent me the list of questions, I had to think about, why have I ended up here? Well, part of my story is when I got to the UK, I worked for SwimTrek for a few years, and then I didn't quite fit their model, because it was more about they wanted young, vibrant people to be their guides. And I didn't feel they respected us older, more experienced people who had a bit of life experience, even though we got on really well with all the guests and we could give them a good life experience. So I left SwimTrek, and then I got what I called a grown-up job again, which was working for the UK tax authority. So I started
back in tax.
Which I found a big challenge to me because of the different laws in the UK.
Sure.
But what I had was the few decades of experience working in the ATO as a tax auditor, where I could talk to corporations and just get them on the right track with a cooperative basis. And I used to have, we had a lot of graduates employed, and they were very smart. And I'd say to them, your job is to work out how we defeat their legal arguments. My job is to talk to them and get them to tell us things they didn't want to really tell us. So I'll show you how to find the problems. Your job is to defeat the problems using your legal knowledge of your legislation. Because I'm not going to try and learn your legislation, because it's just too complex for me to learn at this stage of my life. But together we can form a good team. So that's what happened. So I was there for 6 years, but during COVID, by that stage, my second marriage had fallen apart. My wife had gone back to Australia. I was living by myself. I was due to visit Australia in 2020 for my son's wedding. March 2020, I was going to stay with my dad, my mother had passed away in 2017. It was going to be my first trip back to Australia after leaving in 2014. But unfortunately, the timing was bad, March 2020, and I never made it to Australia. My son's wedding was postponed for 3 months. My father took ill and passed away in late April 2020. So I missed his funeral. All this was all going on while I was still working for the UK tax authority.
And you had no social support system. You had no social support system. So you're working from home. So depression,
working from home.
Chances are depression was beginning to creep back in at that point.
Well, I was conscious of that, having got defeated depression 10 years earlier, 15 years earlier. I was very conscious of that. And with the COVID rules in the UK, they were very strict. So there was basically no human interaction face to face. I remember one of my pals who lived about half a mile away, there was a day they finally relaxed the rules where you're allowed to go to a local park and talk to somebody as long as you didn't get closer than 2 meters from them. So we went and sat in a park, sat on 2 park benches and just chatted to each other for an hour. And that was just like, oh, how good's this? So that was difficult. My current partner, by that stage, we'd formed a relationship, but we were socially interacting, video calls, that sort of stuff, plus all the stuff at work. But I found getting the work done really difficult. In about 2016, I'd started doing this open water coaching stuff as a hobby. Bits and pieces. I just make myself known to the local swimming community that I'm available for coaching on the basis that I knew a little bit about how to improve people's swimming, how to get them into the cold water, how to make them feel comfortable moving from a pool environment into these big, cold locks, freshwater locks in Scotland. So I started realising that I was doing okay with this sort of stuff, and people were quite happy with me doing that. So I decided that I would leave my full-time job and turn that hobby business into a full-time business. So that's what I did. I was also at that stage, I started in 2018 working for an organisation called Big Blue Swim, which do swimming adventure holidays exclusively in Greece. And that's where I met your good mate Shane. He brought a group over to Crete on one of their trips. So I started there in 2018. I'm still working for them in the summer, taking people on holidays in Greece, guiding them on trips.
Beautiful.
Which is a big contrast to Scotland. But it's a beautiful part of the world, and the Greek waters are fantastic as well. And the people we meet, the contacts we meet in the places we are.
Are they called Big Blue Tours, did you say?
Big Blue Swim.
Blue Swim. I did look at that website because just some of the pictures are just so lovely. I mean, I'll share that. Yes.
Yeah, people ask me about those pictures saying, "Oh, they look enhanced." I said, no, that's what it actually is like.
Look at that. That's Greece. It's just so beautiful.
It's amazing. And I remember going back in 2021 in the little village we use as a base in Crete. And the taxi from the airport dropped me off in the town square, and I was walking through to my hotel, which is about a 5-minute walk. It took me 20 minutes because every restaurant I passed, they'd say, "Come and have a drink now. It's great to see you." They treated you like family.
Wow.
So I found all that great. And now I'm working for Big Blue in the summer. I'm also doing some trips in Croatia for a week every summer on a yacht, where we stay on a yacht for the whole week and sail around the islands off Split, Var, Korčula, those sorts of islands, and just take people swimming and yachting, that sort of thing.
Stunning. Well, they are. Again, I've been to those places and those islands and that whole environment, and they said that seafood kind of diet that is everything I love there. So that's fantastic. So coming back to what motivates you, and why do you do what you do? I mean, so
what do I do? Well, for me, swimming has become like my third leg. And if I don't do enough swimming, I can feel that I'm not my full self. And for me, it was a lifeline during the COVID times. During COVID in Scotland, when they relaxed the rules slightly, they said, you can go out to exercise now, but please travel a reasonable distance only. Now, being Australian, I took that as, well, reasonable is like, 50, 60, 70 kilometres? You go that far to get a bottle of milk. So I was going to Loch Lomond for swimming with meeting friends there on a social basis. What they meant by reasonable was no more than 5 miles from your council boundary. And I was going through 4 or 5 councils.
Right. In other words, don't contaminate people in other regions.
Exactly.
You're doing a marvellous job.
I was pushing the limit, but luckily I never got challenged for it.
Yes.
But it was important that we met. There was a group of 5 of us that would meet up 2 or 3 mornings a week, and we do 2.5, 3 kilometre swims in the loch every morning before work.
Yeah.
So that was a lifeline for all of us, because we all came from different parts of the country. We meet up, have a swim, and then go to work, and it was just fantastic. And for me, swimming is that important to me. It's just part of my life. And I've realised while I was guiding that as part of the trips, we give advice on how to improve their swim stroke so that they can be more efficient swimming longer distances.
Mm-hmm.
Some people come from a background of pool swimming, and we try to tell them, well, you're not doing a 50-metre sprint here, you're doing a 2.5, 3, 4 kilometre swim. You've got to change your technique slightly. And we teach them how to be more efficient. And I realised in conjunction with that, plus the business I was running, coaching in Scotland, that I know a bit, and people listen to me, and I get a buzz out of watching people improve and get more confident and overcome their fears of the water. It's amazing how common in Scotland it is that they've got a fear of creatures like Nessies in the blocks. And I said, look, I understand where you're coming from. I'm Australian. Believe me, we know what it's like to swim with things that can cause you grief. Here in Scotland, I assure you, there might be some big fish, but they're not going to cause you any grief.
Yeah.
But you've got to deal with people's anxieties.
Absolutely. That's right. Imagined anxiety, imagined fears are as real as, well, they're different. They're all imagined fears. Yeah. So just on that, what are some of the common tips you give people? Just talking about how to get into cold water. Give us 2 or 3 key tips that you give people that are common that really help them get out of their comfort zone.
Get out of the comfort zone. I always tell them to take it slowly. Don't rush. I tell them it's going to be painful. I tell them there's an automatic response the body takes. I tell them what that response is. I tell them how to manage that. And tell them you've got to take your time with this. It's not something you can just jump in the water straight away. That is actually inherently dangerous to jump into cold water.
Right.
Because of a thing called cold water shock, which is basically the body's automatic response when it hits cold water is to take a breath. Inadvertently.
You don't want that.
If you're 3 feet under the water when you're doing that, in your body it takes, well, that could be painful.
Particularly taking in water that cold into the body as well.
Exactly. Now, that cold water shock can take place in water, 12, 13, 14 degrees. And I tell people it is painful. Believe me, I know, I understand. I'm Australian. When I just swim on, our group do a swim every New Year's Day, which is the middle of winter.
Super cold, yeah.
Super cold. And the first time I did it, I wore a wetsuit, and I saw all these people swimming without a wetsuit, swimming about 100 metres from shore, thinking, they're going to die. It's too cold. The water's about 5 degrees. They're going to die. What are they doing? They're crazy. I went in and thought, I'm great. I've lasted a huge 5 minutes or so because I wasn't wearing a watch. And I came out and I said to someone, how long was I in there? You were in there for 30 seconds.
Goodness gracious.
Because I didn't have any neoprene boots, and my feet got so painful and cold that it was like 1,000 knives hitting your feet. So I tell people what to expect, how to manage that process, and how to just take it regularly to get used to the cold water. Regular immersion, frequently. The more often you can do it, the better. And I tell people how to relax, how to enjoy it. And what's more, that once you've done it and you get out, you get this buzz. There's a real buzz that you get from it.
Right.
It's like a rush of endorphins. It's almost like a runner's high, that sort of feeling you get from it.
And that's one of the reasons you do it, because that feeling at the end of it.
Yes, exactly. And that sense of achievement, plus it makes you very much live in the moment, because you're concentrating so much on, I'm in a risky environment here, I've got to manage this. All the problems of your life at that time just disappear from your head. You haven't got time to worry about those sorts of things.
Yes.
You're worried about this thing called survival.
Yes. Funny about that. Talk about first world, all the first world problems disappear, and you're just in the moment going, how do I survive this?
Exactly.
Brilliant.
And when we combine that with our yoga experiences, that's the sort of meditative state you're looking for in a yoga environment.
Yes.
And the cold water, people often get it. I get that from being in that water. I just go to another place.
Yes.
So that's one of the reasons I do it. And to share that with as much people as I can, it's great. And to see people achieve things, like I coach people who want to do long swims in Scotland. For example, the length of Loch Lomond, which is 36 kilometres. Less than 100 people have ever done that in skins of solo.
Wow.
So that's more people have swum the North Channel between Northern Ireland and Scotland than have swum the length of Loch Lomond in skins, for example.
Yep.
And I get people come to me and want to do that, and I train them how to do it, give them advice, all that sort of stuff. People just
the temperature of Loch Lomond when they do it is what?
Well, it depends on how much sun we get in the summer. But when you do it in the summer, I've swum in Loch Lomond when it's been 20 degrees. An average summer would be around 18 degrees. But if you've got a cold, wet summer, it could only be around 16 degrees.
Yeah, right. So you've got to be super tough to start getting down around 16 degrees. So 18 is
and you're
winter.
looking at 12 to 14-hour swim.
Yes, it's a long time in the water. So as you say, that vibe, and I know from Pod Squad, the energy of the group at the end of the swim is infectious. We say state is contagious. It's contagious positive energy. So I imagine there's something like that at the end of a cold swim with you guys as well, is there?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We always joke that the swim is not the important part, it's the social interaction around the fire afterwards.
Yes. Well, just amazing. That's what I keep literally this morning. One of the young girls, Sophia Chavez, is about to go to England to be in the Cotswolds with her partner, and they're both swimmers and water polo players. So they immediately, her father came down this morning, and just the whole sense of community that we had. One of our own was leaving, but she immediately wanted to connect with other members of Pod Squad, so I put her in touch with you as well. She wanted to be in touch with people who are connected to us over in London and England and other places, because that sense of community and commonality and then again, Facebook and the social media, people love to stay in touch over that as well. The research shows that as well. I did a bit of work last year with a group called Meetings for Minds, and we're talking about the mental health benefits of cold water swimming and swimming. So there's as you say, the mental health benefits of being in the now and the meditation and the adrenaline and the serotonin and the dopamine that kicks in. But then they said the research showed that at least 50% of the benefit was the social interaction, as you say, and the sense of connection and community that comes afterwards. So it's quite beautiful. And I imagine some of that would go on your tours as well, the connections that people would build.
People make friends for life on those sorts of tours.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Because most people come on those tours aren't in a big group like the group that Shane brought. They come as strangers.
Yes.
And they leave as friends. And you can see it happen. And even us as guides, we make friends with those sort of people. And I've got friends from all around the world now. I get Christmas cards from all around the world from people and they just say to me, when are you working this year? I want to come on one of your trips again. So where are you going to be? And that sort of stuff.
Beautiful.
So it's the social side of stuff is just incredible. And picking up on your point about the social aspect, here in the UK, it's just taken off since COVID. They call it here wild swimming. Which for an Australian, you go, no, you're just going for a swim. What's this wild swimming stuff?
We'll show you wild swimming, mate, in the middle of winter at Cottesloe or anywhere else when there's 3 or 4 metres or 5 metres of waves to get through before you get out the back. That's what we'll show you wild. Coming back to some of the questions, in terms of life-changing moments or life-changing conversations and mentors, when we're talking about leading your best life, we say often there are people or conversations you've had which trigger you. Can you recall 1 or 2 mentors or people that you have influenced you along your path, Greg, in terms of really, as we say, leading life by design? You've made conscious decisions. I note here you said I realised I needed to change. Have there been some mentoring conversations or people in particular that help you make key decisions in your life?
There have, but when I saw that question, I thought about it, and some of the people who had the most influence on me, they weren't someone that I spent a lot of time with.
Right.
And they'd make such a throwaway comment to me.
Mm.
Like I remember I was training for the Australian Masters Games held in Newcastle in the late 90s. And my coach was Donna Proctor,
Mm-hmm.
who was, for those who aren't swimming, she was a middle distance swimmer for Australia, probably in the 80s and 90s. I think 800 metres was her forte.
Mm-hmm.
She swam at world titles, Olympics, that sort of stuff. And there was an older lady in the squad. And at that stage, I was a sprinter. Anything more than 200 metres, I'd say, no, go away. I can't do more than 200 metres in a race. You got to be kidding. Mm-hmm. And she looked at me after about 3 or 4 months of squad training. She said, Greg, I think you'd be a better long distance swimmer.
Wow.
And I went, what are you talking about? 200 metres, that's it. Even when we do the 400 metre warm up set, I don't like that. I love the interval training of 50 metres, 100 metre sets, but the longer ones, no. And that just sat in my brain. And it's when I got to Scotland that I realised, hey, I prefer swimming these longer swims. I prefer doing these 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8K swims.
Yeah.
Just to get that meditative state.
Yes. The meditative state.
And giving yourself a goal. And the sense of swimming a length of a loch in Scotland of various lengths, it's an amazing sense of achievement. I've just swum from one end of a loch to another. It might only be 6, 7 kilometres, but you've done it.
Yeah.
And it's to give you that sense of achievement. And then I realised that, well, as I've got older, my technique and my stroke is more suited for distance swimming.
So she was right.
She was right. And I didn't realise it at the time. But it took me a while for myself to catch up to what she'd seen.
Yeah, brilliant. And as you say, it was a seed she planted in your brain, and it sat and sat and sat.
Yes.
And it was one line.
Exactly. And in respect of other mentors, because when I was in the ATO, I was a leader, I was a team leader, helping other people develop their careers. Mm-hmm. I used to look back on previous bosses I'd had in my career and people who had influenced me and picked out bits and pieces from everyone, even the ones I didn't like very much, just to think, well, what can I do to help people? And I started to build a style of my own, which was giving people the room to grow, encouraging them, giving them the support, challenging them to push themselves, but knowing that I've had their back and I'd support them. If they're doing something for the right reasons and they make a mistake, well, to put an analogy, crap happens, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But you learn more from your mistakes.
Yes.
Rather than being risk averse.
Yes.
So I'd support them. And I thought, I'm just being myself. I'm just treating people as I'd like to be treated. But I keep getting feedback from these people saying, you're one of the best bosses I've ever had. I want to stay in your team forever, all this sort of stuff. And I started thinking, maybe I can be a bit of a mentor type leader. So that's what I've seemed to do. And now when I've got into coaching, where most of it's 1-to-1 or 1-to-2 or 3, it's a mentoring role. It's not only you're giving them skills, you're also giving them confidence, you're giving them self-belief, all that sort of stuff, giving them a program. And I realised that I've picked up a thing or two about this swimming business over the years with various coaches I've had.
Yeah.
And I can impart that to other people and give them confidence. And as soon as they realise that they're improving and they're getting better at what they do, they think you're almost a godlike person because you've managed to do that for them.
Yeah.
So it's nice to see people develop. Like I had a 72-year-old lady who, there's a group that meets at one of our local lochs every Monday. And she was born and bred in South Africa. But she moved back to the UK because her husband was British. Mm-hmm. And her daughter swam a lot. But mum would go in, just go up to her waist and just paddle around. And the daughter came up to me and says, can you teach mum to swim? So I said, yeah, I can do that. She was 72. She was scared of the cold water, scared of the dark water because you can only see 2 or 3 metres on a good day in the lochs because it's so dark.
Oh, gee.
Dark and peaty. I'm now referred to her by her as her Australian swim coach, because I've
Fantastic.
got her now swimming, so she can now swim, and she goes in and swims. So
Beautiful, mate. And that's the sense of achievement you get as well from that, I imagine. Yeah.
oh yeah, absolutely, and just helping people achieve their goals and giving them the confidence. And on the swim trips, you see people improve.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even on the swim trips
over the course
in
of
a week.
4 or 5 days a week. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Because the advantage on those trips, you haven't got 50 metres to do, or more common here in the UK, 25 metres to practice.
Yeah.
You've got a few kilometres to practice.
Yes.
So they get a chance to really get the technique going, and they can really feel it.
And into the rhythm as well.
Yes.
So just on that, what does a day in your life look like, Greg? Give me the average day. What time do you wake up, and what does your day look like?
Well, it depends on the time of year. In the summertime, I'm usually up 5 o'clock, 5:30 to go for a swim, because it's light in the summer in Scotland from 5 o'clock in the morning, and it's the morning's the best time to go for a swim. It's less crowded, the roads are less busy, there's less wind usually, and the locks are stunningly smooth at that time of morning, less people around. So that would be more like the summer, and then I'd be doing some coaching for people. I'd organise coaching sessions around their schedules. In the summer, I'd like to get them exclusively in the outdoor locks, and there's a range of locks I use around this part of the world.
Yeah.
There's also the times I'm in Greece. I get up early to prepare for a day, get on the boat, start the boat trip for the day, take people swim, Taverna for lunch, more swimming, back in the afternoon, prepare for the next day, to go to a local taverna for dinner, repeat. Tough life.
Yeah, beautiful.
In the winter time here, I tend to get up later, because it's often not light till 8:30, 9 o'clock in the middle of winter. Plus it's cold. But my swimming tends to be more in the pools in the winter.
Yeah.
Just because you can't spend enough time outdoors in the winter time to keep your fitness up. It's more about cold tolerance.
Yes.
So my coaching tends to be more indoors in the winter. I do have some clients who want to be experience this cold water stuff, and I'll coach them in the winter outdoor as well.
The super tough ones, eh?
The super tough ones, and the ones who are aiming for, say, a nice mile, that sort of stuff. They've got to get in and do that swimming, and they know if I'm there, because with my style with coaching, I get in with them. I don't stand on the edge and yell at them. Right. I get in with them and walk with them in the shallows when they're starting. When they get better, I swim with them, that sort of thing. So I'm hands-on.
You're getting cold as well.
Yes. So for me, a typical day is not typical. It's flexible, which is great for me. Plus, there's in the winter time, it's time for training, updating qualifications, looking at what's ahead for the next season, talking to people about ideas, what we can do, and that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of stuff going on.
Fantastic. And from a reading point of view, are you much of a reader? What books are you reading at the moment? I like to find out from people in terms of leading your best life. We say if you are what you eat, what food are you feeding your brain?
Well, I love reading. But because of my job working in tax for 35 years, I'd have to read a lot of legal decisions, which were, to say they were dry is probably overstating it.
Beyond dry.
Good cure for insomnia for a lot of people. So I used to read for leisure, read fiction, historical fiction, for example, detective stories. I love reading. I've just discovered an Australian author, Chris Hammer, and reading some of his stuff, because one of his shows was broadcast on UK television here late last year. So just reading those sorts of things. I had a lass come on one of our trips last year from Canada, and she was an author. So I started reading some of her books, which are like detective thriller type stories. So I started reading her books. So I just join my local library and just read while I can, and just read it for fun. And I like to try and pick endings before they happen.
All right.
And I like to read about history, especially coming over to this part of the world when you realise, hey, they've got a lot more recorded history than what we had in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
And it's there in front of you.
Yes.
Like, for example, you see Stirling Castle when I drive down to Stirling, which is about a 20-minute drive from where I stay. And you think, oh, yeah, that was the home of the Scottish king up to the 1600s. Oh, this is where Braveheart had his battle with the English invaders. And just reading and learning about these sorts of things. Just about a half a mile from where I live, there's the remains of a Roman fort that was built there in the 1st century AD by the Romans when they came to the UK.
Amazing. Yeah.
And you just look at it and think, how did they survive in this climate year round?
Yeah.
They had no central heating.
No, that's right. No heating then.
No. So I love the history of this sort of place and just learning about it. And one of the villages we based in Crete is actually when I first got there, I saw this memorial with a New Zealand flag, a Greek flag, the Union Jack, and the Australian flag. And I looked at that and go, what's this? And then I realised when I looked at the memorial, that little village was the embarkation point for from the Battle of Crete, where the Allied soldiers disembarked from there and got taken off to go to Egypt.
Yes.
So a lot of Australians use that village to escape.
Well, that's Prevelly Park in Margaret River. I think it's Prevelly Cove is the place where they escaped from, or they
exactly, and that's about 15 kilometres from the village where we're based in, Prevelly, in Crete. And we take the people for a walk down that gorge that they use as an escape route.
Beautiful.
So when you read about those sort of things and you think, well, people have been here for a long time and starting to learn, hey, we're just here at the moment, we're privileged.
Yes.
I like to learn about what people did in the past. And you think, how do they survive? Like there's a little village we go to on that trip. There's only people there in the summer now. There might be 2 or 3 people there in the winter. It's a beautiful village. You can only get to it by sea or by walking into it. There's no roads into it. During the Minoan times, there was a city of 10,000 people in that location.
Amazing.
And you just look at it and go, oh my goodness, what was the climate like then? How did these people feed themselves? Where do they get the water from? All this sort of questions you ask. Yes. How did they survive?
Yeah.
So just trying to picture all that sort of stuff. I love reading about that. And
as you say, history. Coming back to history, a question I'd like to ask you, because you're in the tax office, you're talking to companies, either you're trying to get tax out of them, but you would have experienced businesses that were successful and prosperous and businesses that were not successful and prosperous. From your observation, from the tax office experience, what would you say are some of the characteristics of businesses that were successful and prosperous versus those businesses that couldn't pay their tax and weren't successful and prosperous?
That's a good question. I'll preface it by saying for the latter half of my career, I was working exclusively on the top end of town. So they were the public companies. By definition, most of them are successful. They've been around for a long time. They know what they're doing. They're good at what they do. If they got into trouble, I wouldn't deal with them per se because they'd fall off the radar and someone else has to deal with it. I'm looking at the ones who are paying their tax or choosing to take positions that to try and reduce their tax. So the law is not black or white, it's shades of grey. And for tax law, it's shades of grey personified. And it's the interpretation of the law. So it was, for us as a organisation and for the large businesses, they started realising the most successful ones were the ones that were managing risk the best. And one of the risks they had was the taxman coming along and creating problems for them. So the best ones would realise, well, we don't want to be putting ourselves in that position in the first place. Okay, we might be able to come up with some arrangement where we might save 50 million Australian dollars tax, but is it worth the potential aggravation of an expensive audit and lawyers and court cases? What do we want to do? And the better ones would say, we're not going to worth it to us for our bottom line. It's best for us to be managing it and just cooperating. You might pay a bit more tax, but we're managing the risk better.
Yeah, and have less potential group.
Yeah. Some, of course, were willing to push the envelope.
Yes.
That was, and in their business, with this one particular one I was working with, that was very obvious from their corporate pushing the envelope in everything they did.
Yeah.
And they were very successful. A lot of people got very good careers out of that, got paid very well for pushing that envelope. So tax was just another thing they pushed on.
Mm-hmm.
So that was always a challenge, working with those sorts of people and earning their respect and
to know that you weren't going to be a pushover.
Yeah, exactly. But when I did start my career, you start with a very small mum and dad firms.
Yes.
The tradies.
Yes.
And you could see the ones that were going to succeed. The ones, and it wasn't always the best tradesmen that succeed.
No.
It's the ones who had that mix of, I'm good at my job, I can market myself, I get respect, I don't rip people off, I live in the community, I work in the community, and that sort of attitude. So they're the ones I saw succeeding and growing and over the years.
Brilliant, Brett. So they saw, which again, this is what we often say, they see themselves as business people, which actually means finance, marketing, people, tax, ongoing learning, versus I'm a tradie and I just bill people and then money comes in. And and I hope somehow I don't go to jail by not paying enough. We call it the technician versus the business person.
Yes.
On that. Yep.
Yes.
So as we move to a close, Greg, because we could talk for hours, but as we move to a close, and things like, as you say, you've dealt with your depression, your divorce. Swimming, clearly, as you say, is really like a lifesaver. It's such a key, as it is for me as well. That I needed to change. That making that decision, I needed to change. And the other piece that's in there is giving people the room to grow. As you say, people love that support and the space to grow versus a micromanagement. But there's so much in there. And today, as you say, helping people go slowly as they move outside their comfort zones. And as we often say, life actually is. The joy of life is actually outside the comfort zone, and you're taking people out there when you're talking about leading your best life. Is there anything I haven't asked you, or anything you'd like to deal with or share before we wrap up?
Well, I did see that question and I thought, well, these questions look retrospective to me.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing here about what are your plans for the future.
Okay.
What's ahead of you?
Excellent. Very good question. Yes.
So I thought I'd throw that one to say, well, what about the future? Because we don't stand still.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, for me, my next thing is starting these adventure tours that I do in Croatia and Greece, starting them up in Scotland. That's my next aim. And I'm trying to put things in place to do that in my local area, to bring people from around the world to my local area and share that with them. Plus, of course, there's the constant battle with Father Time. As we get more mature, we realise that we're not 25 years old anymore, and the body sometimes has to be nurtured and cared for more. So taking that time out to do that, and there's other things like, I remember standing at Cottesloe Beach and looking over at Rottnest Island and going, maybe one day I might swim that. It doesn't really look that far, even though it's how far it is. You think, maybe one day, and just leaving that there and just think, I can do that. And I've also got an aim to swim the length of Loch Lomond myself as a solo swim in skis.
Wow, mate.
But that would mean I'd have to find about 2 years worth of training to get up to that.
What did you say? 36K was it? 36K.
36K.
So that's like Rottnest is 19.7, so it's another pretty much 16K on from that.
Yes.
That's a big swim. That's a
big swim. So that's something I've got, because there's an organisation that do a swim race there every second year. And I've realised that if I do it using their rules, which are what I do it as, I'd be the oldest person to have done it. So just to think, well, if I'm the oldest person who can do it, It's something to aim for. So it's just something that's in the back of my mind. I have done the 3 stages wearing a wetsuit on 3 different weekends, swam with people, 12, 13 Ks each time.
Yep.
But there's in the back, I remember one day I was training with a guy who was doing that race down the lock, and I was training with him by swimming. We did halfway. And the boat I had with me, they said, Greg, you look fresh as a daisy. Why don't you keep going? We'll take you all the way to the end. And I said, well, a couple of reasons. A, I've run out of food, and B, I've left my car just here at the halfway mark. So I didn't do it.
Wow.
It's one of my regrets that maybe I should have.
Well, I can tell.
Just kept going.
That seems like the very thought that your coach put in your head. It sounds like it's in there, like a little burr under the saddle. It's going to chip away. And I can see in a year or two's time whether you're going to be swimming Rottnest or swimming that or both. Rottnest could be a training swim for your Loch Lomond swim.
Yeah, I might do a 2-way.
Yeah, well, there's another option, mate. Greg, thank you so much for your time today, mate. Fantastic. And folks, you want to get in contact with Greg, then did I share that, Greg, in the water website? I'll just do that now just so that we know that it's there. It's all there. Go to his website, Greg in the Water, Glasgow Open Water Swimming Coach. It's all there. Look at all his qualifications there. You can see he's passionate about swimming. He loves people going out of their comfort zone. So if you're in the UK or you're thinking of going, and as you say, Greg, you're looking to take people and share with them the joys of swimming in water in Scotland, and I'm sure somewhere along the line there'll be bagpipes and kilts and a few other things as well.
Yeah, if people are coming from Perth over this part of the world, visiting Edinburgh or Glasgow, or Edinburgh's only an hour away from where I am. So right. I can show people some amazing swimming. There's amazing locations here to swim year round.
Brilliant. Well, I'll be sharing this with our 500 people on our Pod Squad group, plus it'll be on Spotify and YouTube and a whole range of places, Greg. And I look forward to staying in touch with you, mate. And I look forward to you continue to share some of those photos you have been, which I then put on our Pod Squad app, whether it be the ice or Croatia or Greece or wherever you happen to be. Greg, thanks so much for your time today, mate, and keep leading your best life and keep helping others lead their best life as well.
Okay. Great to meet you, Lee, and thanks for making me so welcome at Pod Squad when I came and visited. It was fantastic. So great to catch up with you. All right.
All the best.
See ya.
Bye.